Okay. Can you all hear me properly? Okay, good. Incorporating this new
Yes.
AirPods into the picture. Okay, so again, formal namaste and welcome to this evening space. I hope that you can also join the morning practices because it's going to be less theoretical and much more experiential. But I do find that the theory is very important, at least to understand what we are dealing it when it comes to understanding our being. And that's why I want to open with this module that for me is very life-changing, which is the seven bodies or the Maya layered theory. And the seven bodies, it's called koshas in Sanskrit. Kosha is a body. It's actually translated as sheet, so like a container, a sheet, like a in the ancient world, warriors would have a sword and they would keep the sword wrapped around the sheet. And so sheets are these like vessels, container for something else. And so when we talk about, and I'll get into how this is in relation to our being, when we talk about our being a container or a vessel for something, the Taittiriya Upanishad, which is a book from the 6th century before Christ, talks about how we are containers, how we are vessels, how we have these koshas that contain spirit in basic language. And so I want to start this retreat right on with this subject because I do believe that it can be life-changing as we delve into our meditation practice and as we delve into self-exploration to understand that we are multidimensional beings. And so the Kosha theory, because it really is a theory, at the end is a concept that can lead us to an experience, may clarify some things, a very ancient theory, because we're talking about something that was being discussed and studied in the 6th century before Christ. So it's a very ancient in terms of what history is, how we conceive history to be. It's a very old subject, and therefore it is very intriguing because currently when we meet someone else or when we relate to ourselves, we usually relate to ourselves as this self-image of what we think we are. Usually we're dealing with matter only, like what I can see, what I can touch, what appears in my reality that the eye can see. And this understanding tells us like, whoa, there's this whole field of depth of who we are. And it was being studied back then. And what I find so intriguing about this subject is that it not only it talks about our multidimensional being, but it's also a multidimensional subject. And what I mean by that is that when we begin to study comparative religion and see, like, oh, this was what Buddhism was saying at that time. And then Sanskrit took it along, or not Sanskrit, the Vedas took them along. And then that developed into Hindu theory. But somewhere along that timeline, Egyptian philosophy was coming into being, and they had their own ideas of that we were not only our bodies, but we were these vessels for consciousness, and how did we activate our human potential. And around that same time, there was, well, later down the century, but along that same subject, there was the Kabbalah and the understanding that there's this spectrum of consciousness that the body, that inhabits this body. And so then we have Christianity, right? And that we are beings that have a soul, and that soul is a part of God. And so I just want to open the framework to this being one field of study that I resonate with very much, and I find that's very helpful. But there's so many others that we can link and interweave with them. Yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about. One of the ways in Christian philosophy is that we have mind, body, spirit. This is actually the YMCA method that then they brought to India. And another time I'm going to give a talk on the history of yoga because it's fascinating. There's also this multicultural brew that came into what we think of as yoga, or what we conceive of as yoga. But there was this understanding of like, okay, we have these bodies with a thinking consciousness, and that thinking mind can relate to something larger than itself. And so when we talk about our mind, and this workshop with Gyana, we will be undergoing a deep dive into what this is, what our thoughts are, what our perceptions are, our body, which is our biological being, right, that is part of an environment and in relationship to other beings, which is we can see with our mere eyes, and then how we are in relationship with this quantum unified field, with this field of possibilities. And I'm starting to use more the terminology of quantum physics because it's not atheistic at all. It speaks of God as this whole perspective. And throughout the workshop and throughout the retreat, I'll be referring to multiple names of God. And maybe even just to start with right now, maybe some of you have heard me say, in terms of when we speak about God, my favorite name of God is Mysterium Tremendum ad Fascinam, which is a Latin expression for God. And within this name, the reason why it's my favorite is because it's this mystery that is all fascinating and that causes awe and inspiration. Mysterium tremendum ad fascinam. So when I speak about God, I speak about this all-pervasive intelligence that is absolutely loving and compassionate, and that it creates awe within our lives. And this expresses itself through us. So I'm going to dive now into the Maya layered theory, the Kosha theory. And in the Upanishads, they begin by saying that we are beings, our first body, are beings within a physical body. And later on, this physical body was called the food body, Anna. Anna in Sanskrit means food. So it is this literally a body of food, a flesh meat bag that is alive. It's this biological, fascinating machine. And actually, I still have that Newtonian idea that the body is a machine, because it's really not. There's these two trends of thought in medicine. Maybe some of you are aware of it, like the body as a machine, the body as this living being. But you know, we don't have to control whether our heartbeat will beat or not. We don't have to control whether, okay, I'm going to send the right chemicals so that my digestive system can get going, right? It happens naturally. The heart never misses a beat, right? The digestive system is always in place. Blood is always pumping through our organism. There's this inherent intelligence to our body, and the mind has nothing to do with that, right? And so our physical body as is has everything it needs in order to restore and heal itself. And it has this natural intelligence that is in connection to its inner environment and to an external environment. And I want to talk about the nervous system and explore it together in the workshop. I've grown a particular fascination with the nervous system in the last year because I've been very sick without knowing, always on the go, whether even if it's in the field of wellness, always on the go. And I was so depleted and so tired. And that's when I started to turn my attention to the nervous system. I love the mind. I'm fascinated by the mind. I'm driven by maps of meaning. I'm driven by intellectual knowledge, because to me, if it makes sense, I can do it, right? If it makes sense, then I can heal. If it makes sense and I understand it, then something can change. And yet, I think there's a caveat between thinking and knowing and feeling and being. And I don't think that they should be separated. That's what I am experiencing right now in my own life, but also in my life as a facilitator of healing experiences for other. Um, so this is an attempt to marry the two. Why? Because our nervous system is still part of it's this connection between our physical body and the rest of the bodies. The nervous system is fascinating. We have our nervous system, theoretically speaking, it's our brain, our spinal cord, right? And then all the nerve endings that branch from it. And I want us to understand how it works. Maybe you have explored this already. I like to do it like very simple and kindergarten like, so that we can actually work with it. So we have our central nervous system, CNS, which is driven by our conscious mind. So any conscious decision to do an action is driven by the central nervous system. And then we have the autonomic nervous system, which is what I am mostly interested in right now, which is that which is driven unconsciously. Perhaps you have heard the expression of having a fight, flight, freeze response. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a fight, flight, freeze response is when we feel under pressure, under attack, that we can't deal with the overwhelmingness of a situation. So the cortisol goes up, the adrenal glands are super active, and we're in a threatening situation. And it's very interesting because this is highly important to have active, in the sense of, if we are going to take an airplane and the flight is about to take off and we could miss our flight, it would be very useful to run in order to catch the flight, right? You're not going to be like, oh, it's not meant to be, I'm not going to take the airplane anyway. Like, you run, right? Because it's good to have that aliveness and like alertness. um the these This part of our nervous system was super useful even in like when we had situations of survival. Like, there's an expression used always, like, if there's a tiger coming at you, how much of your energy do you want to have available in order to run away from the tiger? Not 50%, because with 50% the tiger could get you. So 100%, you want to have cortisol fully active. So now we don't necessarily have that situation, although it could happen, but mostly our sympathetic nervous system gets activated with our work, with being under pressure, with not feeling good enough, where a relationship or a romantic relationship makes us feel under pressure, there's an overwhelming. So it's in these daily life situations where we're constantly releasing cortisol, constantly. And so what is happening to all of our nervous systems, and particularly in this time that we are living through with COVID, and the impact that it has had not only on our physical well-being, but also financially, right? Geographically, politically. All of these things create a lot of stresses for our nervous system. And what happens is that it reaches this point where we just can't deal with it, right? So we collapse. And so my invitation and my work right now, again, in my own personal life and in the work that I'm doing with others, is to, okay, how can I regain the power to activate my parasympathetic nervous system. Because the parasympathetic nervous system is that unconscious part of the autonomic nervous system. It's automatic, that will allow for a restoration, that will allow for repair. And recently, in my studies of this wonderful book and work of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, which I'll read about, and I have quoted this in the resources, also to play, to enjoy, to be alive, to connect with others, to play with our partners, to play with our kids, to play with our friends, to play with our own life, to play with God. You know, we've forgotten really how important play is. And so, parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve, which is part of this parasympathetic nervous system. And it's very interesting because I want us to, how about let's all stop taking note, find a comfortable seat with the spine straight. You can close your eyes if you feel like closing your eyes, or you can also keep them open. But I want you to explore if you can find if there are any areas of tension in your body right now. I see some people stretching the neck already. So just notice if there's a place of tension right now. You don't have to think about it too much. Just notice maybe the jaw is tight. Maybe there's tension around the neck, the shoulder blades. Maybe the belly's tight. And I want you to let your belly be soft. Let the diaphragm expand. Let the ribs expand. Really as if you were playing that you're pregnant, like allow the belly to be very, very soft, out in the open, like a soft Buddha belly. And as you let the belly soften, see if there's another part of the body that tenses up. As if you're trying to let go of tension in the belly, and then another part of your body cramps up because it's trying to compensate, it's trying to help. So notice if that happens. If by trying to relax one area of the body, another area of the body tenses up. And if that is the case, then tell that part of the body that tenses up, really communicate with it and say, I don't need you to tense up right now. Thank you very much. And return to that relaxation of the belly. And I want you to bring your left hand to your chest and the right hand to your belly. And next time you take an in-breath, let the belly expand. And on the out-breath, let your respiratory system empty out. Empty out completely. And take a deep breath in. And when that breath is complete, exhale out. Let your shoulder blades melt down. Let your spine lengthen. Deep breath in. Out breath out. See if your mind wanders off and return to that sensation of the belly expanding and contracting. Feeling how your hand moves with the belly. Feeling how your chest also opens and contracts. Long, deep out breaths. And let your hands return to a comfortable position. It really doesn't matter how they are. Just let them rest. Let your hands rest. And when you bring your hands down, notice if you can release tension in your shoulders simply by letting the out-breath melt the shoulder blades down. And so see if with the in-breath you can lengthen your spine, so as if you wanted the crown of the head to touch the roof. And with the out-breath, your shoulder blades melt down. So the in-breath lengthens, opens space, and the out-breath softens, invites a let go, invites a release. And bring your chin towards your chest. So you're lengthening the backside of your neck. There's no need to force, just letting the back of the neck lengthen. Maybe even try to bring the breath to the back of the neck. And let the chin move to one side. And if your ear is too close to your shoulder blade, slide that shoulder blade away from you. So you're opening more the other side of the neck. And do that on the opposite side. Taking your time, moving very mindfully, lengthening the neck, letting the breath travel to all those little spaces it usually doesn't travel to. And you can alternate from side to side, bringing space to your neck. Moving at your own pace. And when it feels complete, very gently allow your head to sit back on top of your spine. And let your chest open as if your shoulder blades wanted to kiss one another. And then relax your shoulder blades. Notice if the mind drifts away and bring it back to the sensations of this moment. Paying attention to how the body feels. And maybe even doing a before and after comparison. So tuning into how your spine felt in the beginning when we started the workshop, how it feels right now after the meditation. Taking note of that. Take a deep breath in. Let the breath travel all the way to the diaphragm. Drinking the breath, drinking as much breath as you can. And with the exhale, soften, relax, release, let go. And another drink of the breath as if you were taking this amazing elixir, this delicious elixir of breath, nourishing the lungs. And the out breath, let it go. Relax, release, let it go. And let your breath return to a natural rhythm, a natural pace. And begin imagining opening the eyes and returning to our shared field, of learning, of exploration, of delving deep. And this time with the intention of making it real. Not so much learning something for the pleasure of the mind, but also for embodying these different facets of our being. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And we'll be doing throughout these workshops moments of pause and exploration. I want you to keep in mind this state of being after doing this exploration and engaging with the breath, engaging with that parasympathetic nervous system. How do we feel? How do we operate? Noticing if there's a shift in the state of being. And the reason why I did this very short exercise, I put the wrong one here, is because I wanted us to explore the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve starts at the occipital and it travels throughout the throat. It's basically a nerve that follows the central nervous system. So it will travel all the way through the heart, digestive system, the genitals, all the way to the sacrum. In the book of The Body Keeps the Score, which again, I've written the name of the book in the resources if you're interested. I want to read a little bit about the vagus nerve. It talks about the window into the nervous system. It talks about what we just went over of the autonomic nervous system having the sympathetic response, fight, flight, freeze, and the parasympathetic. And actually, before moving along, I forgot to say, and I think this is very important. Usually when we talk about stress, we talk about stress because we do so much and we feel so much coming at us. There's this pressure. And so we want to either battle it and fight it, or we want to run away and we can't do it. And the freeze is, I think we haven't explored so much collectively. And I think it ails us very much. And I think that the freeze is so innocent and it's so innocent, is this response of like, I can't deal with it anymore. I don't know what to do. And we just freeze, right? So usually we think we're just like super capable beings. We fight, we fly away. But the freeze, I think, needs, because sometimes a lot of like, well, the DMS-5 and the psychiatry, and there's a lot of I think overlooking on what the freeze response is and how important it is that we address it, because it is a matter of feeling safe. How we feel safe in our own being. Here it is. So the reason why I wanted to quote from this book is because in this chapter of body-brain connections, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk says, or speaks, in speaking about the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve, he calls it the neural love code. I love that. He's this like world famous psychotherapist talking about the nervous system as the neural love code. And he calls the vagus nerve the wanderer because it travels throughout all these spaces that I just said. So this nerve connects numerous organs, including the brain, the lungs, the heart, the stomach, and the intestines. So this nerve provides us with a more sophisticated understanding of the biology of safety and danger. What does that mean? If we feel that we are in danger, this nerve is going to be so stressed up, and there's going to be so much cortisol that these main organs that we just talked about, heart, lungs, digestive system, is going to be under stress. But it's not because, and this is so important for us to think about, it's not because we have a digestive system issue, because we ate something that was bad. I mean, that could be it, and of course that's super important to think about, but I'm talking about chronic or something that repeats itself. Is it really that we're eating something, or is it that we're so stressed up that our nervous system cannot give the proper safety to that digestive system to work? Does that make sense? That danger, safety. So this understanding is based on the subtle interplay between the visual experiences of our own bodies and the voices and the faces of people around us. So how a kind face or a soothing tone of voice can dramatically alter the way that we feel. That's why people love guided meditations, because it makes them feel safe, calm. And why, when we are being ignored or dismissed or gaslighted by someone in our close circle or by society, we feel disorganized, right? So how beautiful it is to create a sense of safety. And not always we will be able to get that sense of safety from the world. I'm slowly learning that ashram environments are very safe to a certain extent. And so how do we create that safety for ourselves? And I, I've come to see that it doesn't matter how old we are. It doesn't matter, really doesn't, like, how can we make ourselves feel safe is one of the most important questions in order to be a functioning human being. And this nervous system brings us to a deeper layer of our being, which is our energy body. So energy body, if you've heard of people working with acupuncture or people working with the meridian lines, people working with EFT, emotional freedom technique, people working with more energy, and there is psychology in the energy, working with the energy body. And as we see, the energy body is completely intrinsic to the physical body, right? They work together. So the energy body is that which animates the physical body. And the energy body in Sanskrit is referred as prana, our prana maya kosha. I'll talk about maya in a few moments, what that means. But prana is this life force. And so depending on which culture we are in, it can be ki or chi. It is that which animates, that which gives life. And I find that in this new age culture, we talk a lot about my prana, my energy body. And this is very true, because we need to get a hold of our own energies before we deal with the world's energies. And yet, I want to invite us to think about that it really, the prana that animates me is the prana that animates you, right? There's not one channel of prana for you and one for me and one for somebody else. I love to say, and we can actually do it as a meditation, so another invitation for you to close your eyes and connect with your breath. Again, noticing how the breath flows in and out of your organism. tuning into the rhythm of the breath. There's no need to control it, change it, just tuning into the rhythm of the breath. That dance between the exhale and the in-breath. And I want to suggest this exercise. So as we breathe, notice the quality of air that we're breathing. And by quality, I mean notice how visible or invisible it is. Notice how dense it is or how free it is. Air is free. And so what I am guiding you to is to explore how air connects us all, how this breath that I am breathing, this breath that I am using in order to speak, this breath that animates the voice for me to talk and for you to hear me, is the same air that you are breathing. Might be in a different location, but it's air. And take a moment to think about your loved ones, people that are very dear to you, and notice how you're on that same playing field of prana. Prana is animating everything that is alive right now. And right now is the evening here in Costa Rica. But maybe think about that the air that we're breathing was the same air that birds were flying on earlier today. How does that make you feel? The air that you're breathing is the same air that birds fly on. And taking in this reality of interconnection, you can open your eyes when you're ready. And I am delving here into a hierarchical difference, I would say, in theology and metaphysics, which is that when we talk about energy that is interconnected in Hindu philosophy, rather than it being prana, it would be called Shakti. So Shakti is that which animates everything. Prana is more of an individual energy. But Shakti animates prana, if you want to get more philosophical and get it right. So I want to talk about the gunas because I find it very, very useful when we're tuning into our energy. Like I can say like, oh, I'm tuning into my energy right now. What does that mean? And I'm mixing philosophies here because I learned this way. And because ultimately it's not separate. So the gunas comes more from a Hindu-based study, and it's very, very hand in hand with Ayurveda. I don't know if any of you has a little bit of familiarity with Ayurveda. Yoga, as the science of yoga was developing, the science of Ayurveda was developing, and so they were constantly in communication. Yoga was the study of consciousness, and Ayurveda was the study of our living reality. They're not separate, and so they were constantly gaining things from one another. And so the gunas talk about the spectrum of possibilities that we have in these living bodies. We have, at the center, we have sattva guna. To one side of the spectrum, we have tamas gunas, and to the other, we have rajas. So if you did this morning's practice, you may have explored this range of the spectrum of states of being. But I'll repeat it again. Also because how we are feeling right now is not necessarily how we felt in the morning. So when we feel lacking, depleted, tired, overwhelmed, when we feel like this energy of like, oh, I can't do more, I can't get out of bed kind of feeling. Even you may be out of bed, but that's how you feel. You know, this like very, I would say, heavy, earthy, depleted sense of energy is what in Sanskrit would be called tamas, tamasic energy. It's very associated to the earth. That's why in Ayurveda is the kapha energy. What's if we have too much of this and we want to travel to something else, which is usually what we do in this century, it's like, oh no, just drink 2 cups of coffee, go to the gym, do this, do that, get in touch with friends, go on a party. Yeah, I have it again. So I switched to Rajas. Rajas is more of a jumpy kind of energy of doing, of achieving, of imagine fire, active wildfire. It's this like, I need to do this and I need to do this and I have to get this done and I can't stop thinking about him and what she said and how come this. And it's a very active energy. It's certainly alive. It's certainly more active than tamas, but it's also very unbalanced because we're constantly filled with anxiety, with self-doubt, and with the sense that we're not good enough. And so in between this, I can't do anything, I need to do it all, there is the sattva energy, which is a balanced state of being. So when we tune into our energy and we feel clear-minded, we can think clearly, we know how we feel, or at least we have some idea of what might be happening. There's no doubt, and if there is doubt, we can become aware that there is doubt. We feel centered, we feel very connected to ourselves. We feel like what needs to get done can get done, what doesn't need to get done won't get done. We can listen, we feel heard. We take time, and time is a precious gift, to tune in to this sense of equanimity that we all have. That's sattva guna. And so when we work with energy and with our own energy, I think it's very important to notice in which of these we might be gravitating on at different moments and with different people and in different situations, because you might find that you're very rajasic in one situation and in another you're totally tamasic, right? So first, learn how to tune in. So, okay, I can take just a moment to see what quality of energy do I have available right now. And that doesn't have to be good or bad. And this is very important. It doesn't mean that Rajas is better than Tamas. They're both communicating different things, very important things. And there's times where, again, we need to activate more Rajas, and there's times where we need to go into that deep cave of introspection. So we get into our mind body and the structuring layers of the self, and a lot of the field that we will be delving into has to do with the mind body, because thoughts are so powerful and they're all in this field of mind. We can't really see them until they actually manifest. And the mano, maya kosha, mano, mind, is our body of our beliefs, which I have quoted in the resources, so you'll be able to see. There's this book by Dr. Bruce Lipton called The Biology of Belief, is quoted in the resources. Very interesting. Biology of belief, so how our thoughts and ideas, our interpretation of ourself of the other and of the world create biology, create situations, create conditions. So it's not only that health and wellness and beauty starts from within, and it's not that illness starts in the mind, is that everything starts with ideas. And so we have access to learn to fine tune what is happening in our minds. And I know I'm forgetting his name, Michael, of course, Michael Beckwith is this doctor. And he says something that I find very useful. He says that if we have tonic thoughts, we will have tonic responses in our biology. We will produce tonic chemicals. If we have toxic thoughts, the one who suffers is ourself, our nervous system, our body. So this will create toxic chemicals. Does that make sense in terms of how the mind controls? So we have this personality body, the mind body, the manomaya kosha, which is all of our conceptions of the world or all of our interpretations of the world. Doesn't mean that the world is that way, it's just how we interpret it. And so a way to explore the mind body is to first notice what is happening in the mind. What am I thinking about constantly or often? I find so like, how do I find this? Like outrageous and at the same time super inspiring to know that the thoughts that I have are almost never new. Like I'm constantly always thinking the same thing, and so it's outrageous on the one hand, but it's also inspiring because then it invites me to want to link different thoughts and think about things that I usually don't think of, and ideally things that create or thoughts that create tonic chemicals. So I'll do a little exercise with the mind body in a moment. I have this video I want to show you because some people speak more eloquently than I do. So could you hear that? No. Okay.
No.
Let's do this.
You have to transform every part of you.
Has any of you seen the documentary Heal?
Yes.
Okay, good, amazing. I think it's something that we should watch at least every 6 months. So this is an interview to one of the doctors that was part of the research. It's quite short, but she talks about the power of the mind.
Transform your health.
Can you hear? ¿Y suena bien?
Yes.
Sí, ahora.
Yes.
Thank you.
To transform your health, you have to transform every part of you, including your emotions. I often tell women that if you keep doing the things you've always done, you're going to get the same results, right? So a healing journey is not just about the physical aspect, but it has to include the emotional, mental, and spiritual aspect. So work with a professional counselor, work with somebody who specializes in energy psychology, things like EFT and EMDR and other things. Take time to meditate. We know that meditation slows down that sympathetic drive and stimulates parasympathetic drive in our body so that healing can take place. We now know, because of the science of psychoneuroimmunology, which means basically your thoughts affect your brain, which affect the rest of you. We know that there's a powerful connection there. The Heart Math Institute, for example, did an interesting study on the effect of our thoughts on our DNA. So they trained scientists to project their feelings to little petri dishes, I guess, of DNA. And so when they projected anger and frustration and guilt and hatred, guess what happened to the DNA? The telomeres, the ends of the DNAs fell off, the DNA shrunk, it didn't function very well. On the flip side, when they projected love, joy, and peace and hope, gratitude, then the DNA, didn't contract. It just expanded and was vibrant and healthy.
This experiment.
¿Mm? Perdón, una preguntita. ¿Este documental está en Netflix?
No, está en Gaia TV y creo que lo puedes accesar por Cuevana también.
Ah, ok.
O en Amazon. En Netflix no lo encontré y creo que está en YouTube, yo creo.
Ok, super.
Recomendado 100%. Voy a buscarlo. Después sí puedo encontrar el link y se los paso en el newsletter con un link ahí porque definitivamente creo que es parte del homework.
Gracias.
Gracias a vos por preguntar. And this experiment of that she was talking about, the little plates with the cells, it's very micro. And there was an experiment done years before that with water and with sand. Have you seen this one of thoughts of love and kindness create beautiful patterns, almost like mandalas and sacred geometry, and thoughts of hatred and resentment created chaotic things. And so we're literally seeing it happen instantaneously to this object, and also our body will receive that, right? Very subtle. And rather than, I think this is some place where the mind can get very tricky, because if we have found that we have created illness of some sort, the mind can be like self-attacking, like, oh, how come I did this? I'm so bad. I got myself sick. But really what would be ideal is for us to meet that with love and with kindness and with a sense of like safety, right? And this guides us to our wisdom body, the Vijnana Maya Kosha. Vijnana, Gyana is knowledge. V is archetypal knowledge, this archetypical intelligence. And we'll talk a lot about this in just a moment. The wisdom body is a very wise field that we have access to. It's our intuitive guidance. It's beyond the language, and yet it can give us very powerful thoughts, very powerful ideas, very powerful guidances that can change the trajectory of our lives if we choose to listen. And so our wisdom body is a field of unconditional acceptance. What that means is the mind may think that something was wrong. The mind may think that something was not coming from a good place. The wisdom body will take that and derive wisdom out of it. So rather than being attacking to our own being, the wisdom body will embrace it and will say, this was actually a very important teaching. The wisdom body will let us know that if a person is another being, another seeming being is creating trouble in our lives, will actually teach us how this person can be our teacher. Doesn't mean that this person, we're not talking here whether something is good or bad, or something was a crime, or something was inappropriate. That has a very important place in our lives, especially with a lot of game and manipulation that can happen. But the wisdom body is so vast and intelligent that it will embrace everything as is and will allow this acceptance of what is, non-judgmentally. And non-judgmental, again, doesn't mean, and I was saying this to one of you in a private session, that it doesn't mean that something was good. It doesn't mean that we're letting that go through. It doesn't mean that in situations like rape or murder or stealing or these things that we do as human beings to each other doesn't mean that it's right and it needs to be congratulated. So that the wisdom body can embrace that and say, I accept that this happened. I'm not going to run away from it. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to sit in that rest and repair mode and bring wisdom into this situation. And bring wisdom into the situation is not necessarily bring knowledge or bring information, is bring transformation. Does that make sense? So wisdom body doesn't mean that there will be some sort of conceptual thing. This thing that happened to me, if I can really embrace it, accept it, and nurture it, is going to derive such great transformation in my life that it's going to be the wisdom that helps me navigate through this reality. The wisdom body is that which can notice from a witness perspective, right? So we talk about witness consciousness. Wow, I'm noticing that I'm getting pretty nervous. Okay, interesting. I am getting pretty nervous. Who is the one who can notice that I'm pretty nervous? Ah, that's interesting. Wow, I'm noticing that I'm getting super triggered when she talks to me this way. Ah, okay, I'm getting super triggered. Interesting, I'm getting triggered. What is this that can notice and it's not entangled? Wow, I am so in love. This is so passionate. He is so romantic. I want him to devour me. Okay, I'm noticing that there's a little bit of something happening here. What is that can notice? So it doesn't matter in which spectrum our minds get caught up on. What is it that can notice? What is it that can witness? And what is it that can compassionately say like, okay, what's going on in here? That's our witness consciousness, which it derives from the wisdom body. And the way that I love describing witness consciousness is this non-judgmental self-awareness. I'm not saying, like in this case of like, wow, he's so amazing. I want him to be, I don't know why I'm not thinking about this. I'm not a good example. I'm drawing a blank. I can't think clearly. What is it that can notice that and say, you can't think clearly. I notice that you're not thinking clearly, but I'm not judging you for it. It's just what's happening right now. And that opens perspective. Now I'm thinking more clearly. So it is witness consciousness that allows us to be in absolute connection with ourselves, with our heart, with our being, with our experience of this moment without labeling or reacting. What would happen if right now I was trying to give an example and it didn't work out because I couldn't put it one and two together about this romantic story? You noticed I was saying a romantic story and then I couldn't carry it through. So I said, okay, no, that's not what's happening. I'm drawing a blank. I noticed that I'm drawing a blank. What would have happened if I would have said, well, I'm so stupid. I don't know. That must mean that I can't teach this workshop because I can't tie two and two together. Witness consciousness allows us to take a step back and say, this is what's happening right now. But there's no label. There's no reacting. And that just gives a sense of peace and of perspective. In little moments like this, it really makes a difference. Moment by moment. What would happen if I don't label and I don't react? I respond, right? It doesn't mean like, oh my God, I can't teach this anymore. I don't have any examples. Goodbye, everybody, right? Like, and we do this in life. That's the fight-flight response. Do you see how subtle it is? When we access witness consciousness in this capacity to observe our experience, something opens up. And that's the mysterium tremendum ad fascinem. That's the mystery. Like it. It just opens up something greater. So with this access to this deeper layer of our being, we're entering a personal practice, because it is a very personal practice of, it's like we're developing this muscle. Sometimes it doesn't happen so naturally, but the more that we allow ourselves to revisit this space and build a relationship with it and notice consistently and non-attached, it becomes like there's this discipline that allows us for more intelligence, I would say. And finally, after the witness consciousness, after this wisdom body, they speak of the bliss body, Ananda Maya Kosha. And in my recent studies with Janelle Lynn Schuler, she's doing right now her PhD. She's my teacher. She's doing her PhD in the transformational power of yoga. And in our discussions, she's begun to call the bliss body integrated body, and I think that's genius, because when we talk about bliss, and I would like you to think and to explore, what does bliss mean to you? When you hear the word bliss, in Spanish we would say gozo, holgorio. What does that bring up for us when I talk about bliss? And you can take a moment to explore that if you want to journal. In my prior studies at the ashram, bliss was something so precious, like a diamond, like this unending well of purity that I could never access. It was like bliss was this like total divine grace that I could never touch. And the idea of bliss as integrated body seems so achievable. Like it nothing gets out. Bliss is this capacity to be with all that is, and yes, eventually we will open up to receive that that divine grace and that loving awareness that comes from the source of who we truly are. But I don't know if you're able to follow what I am saying. Bliss as integration means this holistic integration of who we are. And what would that mean? Because constantly we're pushing things away. Parts of our being we're pushing away. And this will lead us into the next part of the workshop. Bliss, what is it? And the resources, I'll send you this so that you have it. So before we transition to the next part of the workshop, I would love to take a break and let you use the restroom if you have to, if you want to bring some water, and we'll come back at 8:20, so in 8 minutes, okay? So I'll see you in the same Zoom link in 8 minutes, 8:20. Thank you very much. Okay. So I wanted to do a little integration exercise. So I've mentioned in the beginning, part of my intention is that we really learn to integrate this information as an experience. So let's do something that I've never done before. Wherever you're sitting, lift yourself up and come to standing. If you want to have your camera off, you're more than welcome to turn it off. There's no obligation. And as you are standing, look at your feet. You don't need that much space to move, but make sure that you're standing somewhere that you can just have an arm width distance from your surroundings. And as you're standing, look at your toes, lift up your toes, flare the toes up, then place one toe at a time back down on the surface. And do that one more time, lift up all your toes, and then from the pinky finger, place one toe at a time. Bring your chin towards your chest, lengthening the back of the neck. And roll your spine all the way down. You can bend your knees if that feels appropriate. Let your arms be heavy. Let your head hang like a mango, ripe mango, hanging from a tree. If you feel like you would like to bend your knees to give more support to your lower back, you could do that. And take a few deep breaths into that lower part of your back. Begin to press your feet onto the floor. Really press your feet onto the floor. And let that pressing begin to lift up your spine on the in-breath. Really, really fueled by the strength of the feet. Stand tall and standing. And then dive with your nose, chin, chest, all the way down to your feet. So we're bringing mobility to the spine. And once your head is down and you're hanging, you can move from side to side. You can bend your knees. And let that movement originate from your feet. So it's not like the arms are forcefully moving to the left and to the right, but play with your feet and see if you bend one knee and the other, your spine can move. Very gentle movement. See if you can move from the tailbone, from the tip of your spine, from the sacrum, all the way to your head. Imagining like you're a fish swimming in the ocean. And when that feels complete, let your spine be at center, neutral, and again, press your feet onto the floor. And let that pressing lift your spine up, unwinding the spine. Standing tall. Roll your shoulders up and back. Let your spine be lengthened by the in-breath. You can close your eyes if that feels good. And bring all your awareness to your hands. Let your fingers be loose, relaxed. And feel how your hands are hanging from your shoulders. And notice if you relax the shoulders, melt the shoulders, what happens to your hands? Do they feel more energized, more alive? Long, deep breath. Bring vitality to your fingers. You can move your fingers. And on the in-breath, bring your hands up to your belly, so underneath your belly button, and up into your chest. That's the in-breath. And on the out-breath, turn your palms around and sweep the hands down. So on the in-breath, you gather the hands. And on the out breath, you sweep the hands down. Take your time. You don't have to follow me. Follow your own breath. Bring both hands to your chest, to your hearts. And as if you had a bar of soap, you can begin to soap your chest as if you were showering. You can round your chest, round your belly, soaping, foaming yourself, cleaning yourself, showering yourself. And making sure you get your back, your lower back, soaping. And then one arm, get the armpit, get the tricep all the way to the fingers and shake. Do this 3 times. And then the other, take your time. And then move your hands as if you were playing the piano. Circle your elbows. Out and in. And notice the spiraling motion that happens from the hands through the arms into the chest. Bring your hands to your hips. Open your feet a little bit wider than hip width apart. And begin circling your hips. One direction and then the other. Bring your hands into fist-like position. You can tap your hips down through the legs. Pick one leg and you can hit that leg. If you can, grab your foot and tap underneath the sole of the foot. Tap the sole of the foot. This is tricky for balance. You can always find a surface to support yourself and tap. 9 times. And then let that feet go. Let the hands relax and feel if you find a difference between the leg that you just worked with and the other leg. You can close your eyes. Feel if a leg feels closer to the ground or farther away. Feel if a leg feels, how does it feel? Explore. Travel with the sensations, inquire, inhabit your body. And then begin tapping into the other leg. It's just very simple awakening of the senses, getting ourselves into the body, opening our energy channels. Very simple. And then tap 9 times underneath the foot. I think that was more than 9. Let that foot come to the ground. And then move your weight from one foot to the other. You can slightly bend the knees. Transfer the weight from one side to the other. And let this movement begin to move your torso. But it's the legs moving. It's actually the feet. Like a dance, as if you're moving through honey. As if you're moving through honey. Bring a little bit more intensity to the movement of your feet. And let your arms be like empty coat sleeves, so they're heavy. And let the arms move from side to side. You can close your eyes and notice if the arms want to move by themselves. Let them relax and let the feet take you on the journey. Notice if a part of the body tenses in order to relax another part of the body. Let your jaw be soft. You can let the head move in the direction of the torso. So if the arms move to one side, the head moves to that side. Or maybe you want to explore taking the head the other direction and exploring some new neural pathways, new movements. Very gentle movements. It's confusing sometimes. Activates the nerve playfulness. If that feels awkward, you can just let the head be neutral. And really, really, really gently, taking your own time, let the arms rest again. And return to that soft hip movement, side to side, as if you were drawing an infinity sign with your hips. And then change the direction of that infinity sign. Mm-hmm. And let your hips be in stillness. Feel your feet grounded on the floor. Push your feet onto the floor so that you feel like the floor is pushing into the earth. Bring the tailbone slightly in. Bring the belly button slightly in. And imagine that you're holding a tennis ball in between your chin and your chest so that your neck is long. Take 3 deep breaths here. At your own time, count 3. 1 full in breath, 1 full out breath, and then 2 more. And on the next in-breath, begin to bend your knees slightly and straighten them. Bend your knees slightly and straighten them. Bend your knees slightly and straighten them. And let this movement, this consecutive movement, begin to create a sort of shaking in the body. So you can do it really slow, or you can do it faster, bringing a shaking to the body. So it can be a little bit quicker if you want to shake a little bit more. This is a Shaolin practice. And more shakingness to the body. Let your hands be soft. You can imagine something that shakes, like a maraca, or anything that shakes, and you can imitate that movement. And it can get as big or as gentle as it feels appropriate for you right now. Just shake. If it feels awkward, keep shaking. You can bring the corners of your lips into a smile. That's it. Just keep shaking. It's very interesting, the shaking, what it does to our cells. It renews the synapses. It's quite interesting. That's why they do it. And really, really gently let the shaking come back to neutral. You can close your eyes, bring the left hand to your chest, the right hand to your belly. Deep in breaths, deep out breaths. And let that touch of the warmth of your palms be like an embrace. And begin to remember this idea of integration, this idea of the bliss body, the Ananda Maya Kosha. Feeling how an embrace can create a condition for integration. But not just any kind of embrace, it's a self-embrace, a self-collection, a gathering of forces to create a sense of safety. One breath at a time, feeling that collection of energies, gathering of energies, centering of energies. And now as we stand here, I want you to stand tall, but relaxed. So the physical body is in stillness. And you can try out here, knowing that you can move if you want. So if you want your hands to be open, you can let your hands open. But if you want to bring the palms to your body, you can do that, or whatever feels right, and you can alternate from one to the other. But basically not moving that much anymore, coming into stillness. Noticing the physical body, noticing the heart rate, maybe tuning into what is happening in your digestive system. So maybe you had dinner and you're digesting it. Maybe you haven't eaten and the belly is asking for food. Whatever is happening in the digestive system, see if you can feel. See if you can feel what is happening. And if not, then imagine what could be happening. Imagine how the air moves into your lungs. Imagine this breath being regenerative, restorative. And let the breath take you deeper than your physical body. Let the breath take you to your energy body. How do you feel? Maybe there's an encountering with something new. Maybe something is moving, transforming. Maybe there's a shift of energies happening. Take note of how you feel. Which qualities of energy are available right now. And also notice what movement is happening in the mind. So notice if there's thoughts going on, and take note about what. It can be a commentary of what is happening. It can be a judgment. Whatever is happening in the mind, take note of it. And begin to delve into that non-judgmental presence. What is it that notices that you have a thought? And doesn't it feel good to notice beyond the thought? So explore that. Maybe there's a deeper sense of noticing than the first of noticing. How does this all integrate in your being? How does this bring wholeness? Begin to feel the rootedness of your feet on the floor. The length of your spine. Taking note of this multidimensionality of being. Let the chin drop down to your chest. Let your neck lengthen. And again, begin to curl down your spine, vertebra by vertebra down. You can bend your knees if that feels better. And exhale fully here, emptying out the lungs. And let your hands travel to whatever surface you are sitting on. So if you're sitting at a chair, on your desk, Let your hands travel there if you're sitting on the floor, or if you're on your bed. Let your hands travel and let your entire body find that seat wherever you were sitting on. So let your body come back to seated wherever you were sitting on. Taking the time to adjust your seat, maybe even considering if you want to change seats, and taking the time to find that seated pose. So this is an idea of how this multidimensionality takes place within our being. We can tune into how the physical body is feeling, what is going on, connecting with the different organs that are in functioning, and then delving into the energy body and assessing and checking in, and then without judgment passing through the mind. I often like to think with the mind that we have this thermometer that we can put in our minds to take the temperature of our minds. You've taken life classes with me, you've heard me say this before. So the thermometer will measure what's the temperature of our minds, and if the minds are quite active, then there's many thoughts. It's like a high temperature, a lot of fire. And if we find that there's more space between thoughts, then there's a cooler temperature, but it's just a temperature. And what is it that is taking the temperature? That's where we want to explore, because the mind will always be active unless grace happens. And for me, it's very important to take a look at what is happening in the mind, because some of us can spend our entire lives without looking inside, and perhaps depriving ourselves from the possibility of making different choices. And I think at this time of my life, at this time of where I am with my studies, I think that's what it's about. I may change my mind as I continue to grow, but I really think that choices are a gift that we have and that we sometimes take for granted. And so my hope is that when we delve into these layers of the mind throughout this 3 days, that it opens up to the possibility of choices that sometimes we don't notice. So here we are with the famous, or not so famous, I don't know, structuring layers of the self. And when we were doing these practices of breathing and shaking and feeling, did you feel a sense of spaciousness, a sense of openness, a sense of maybe expansion? Yeah, okay. This that we explore is what this Rinpoche, this Buddhist teacher, Dogo Khyentse, speaks of as discovering space. So when we're living in our tiny little bubble, we're like contracted. I want to make sure I'm recording. I am recording. We're contracted. And when we begin to open that shell of contraction, there's space. And space is something that we're so afraid of. We always want to fill up space. But space is the opportunity for something new. So he says that when we engage in the practice of discovering space, we should develop the feeling of opening ourselves out completely to the entire universe. We should open ourselves with absolute simplicity and nakedness of mind. And this idea of nakedness of mind, I want to revisit throughout our retreat. What does it mean to be naked to the entire universe? And this is the powerful and ordinary practice of dropping the mask of self-protection. And so I want you to have in your field of awareness these two ideas: nakedness of mind and the mask of self-protection. Because again, it's all about feeling safe. And when we are naked, we want to feel safe. There's nothing worse, like I can't think of like feeling naked, like being naked and feeling unsafe. That doesn't feel right. But how nice to like be naked and safe to consciousness, right? There's no need to protect ourselves. And so this retreat, which I've named like 3 different names in the last week, because it really is a work in progress, and I thank you all for your time and deciding to join and explore this with me. Gyana Yoga, this retreat of finding our inner knowledge or inner quest to the essence of who we truly are. And well, I have the layer of the schedule, which I think it's a little bit too late for that, but still we'll go over it for tomorrow. So every morning at 8 a.m. we'll have our morning practice. Feel free to join on Zoom, the same link. And if you can't join at 8 a.m., I record them so you can do the next day earlier or whatever time it fits for you. And in the evenings, always at 7, we have these spaces for discussions. And so the structuring layers of the self is my own module of what is kosher layer theory that we just saw. So kosher layer theory is a theory from the Upanishads, as we reviewed, and the structuring layers of the self is what I've taken after these 10 years of study, and I've said, okay, this is what I've come to discover thanks to my teachers and to my study, which I quote, so that you have reference of where this all comes from, because it's not like it dropped out of inspiration. It's like me piecing together a lot of information from my teachers and my own exploration from what they told me, of what the mind energy is. Because again, we can say this is the physical body, this is the energy body, this is the mind body, but really it's all one, right? So sometimes it's easy to piece it out so that we know how it's made of, but when we have when we're in it, it's all one. Like, and this image is coming to mind of when we're making a cake, we need to know what the ingredients are, and they're separate. The ingredients are separate. We have sugar here, coconut organic sugar here, and we have gluten-free flour, and we have all these different ingredients, right? And then they all come together and they go through this heating process and transformation process, and then we have a cake, and we can no longer see the sugar here and the flour here and the vegan egg here. Like it's all a cake. And so my attempt for us to see what the recipe is this module, but it's and I'm dissecting our being so that we can see those different ingredients, but really it's all working together as one. And I want to open up with this myth from Hindu philosophy that I find it's very useful, and it's called the Samudra Mantham myth, if you want to look it up. Samudra Manthan, also known as the Mount Meru myth. And the myth is there's this mountain that is filled with the nectar of immortality. And just think for a moment what nectar of immortality could be. It's that which gives life. And so the context of this myth, when this takes place, is in the world is going through a period of starvation, metaphorically spiritual starvation. And people are dying and nothing is thriving and things are not working. And so they know that inside this mountain, there is the nectar of immortality, and they want to get it out. And it is such a critical period that the devas, the deities, the gods, have to work with the asuras. The asuras are the demons, the darker forces. And so if you see in this image, this artwork, there's demons and there's gods. There is good and bad. It's working together. And what they do is that they join efforts and they tie Ananta, which is the snake where Vishnu swims or floats. They tie the snake around the mountain, and the demons pull to one side and the devas pull to one side. And they create this friction so that Mount Meru opens up. If you read any of the Mahabharata texts, they're extremely sexual because and we're all adults here, like there's this rubbing of this phallic thing that then creates an erection that then secretes this nectar of immortality, right? It's like se vino la montaña, básicamente. But I think how, and this is in a formal religious text in India, that's their religious text, because sexuality used to be something completely part of life and completely, it wasn't this perverse thing. And so consciousness is this merging of Shiva and Shakti, consciousness and matter. And so it's natural for a myth to be that way. And I think that could be a whole module in itself. But for the purposes of this workshop, when the nectar of immortality comes out of the mountain, along with the nectar of immortality comes poison. And what this myth invites us to contemplate is that whenever we want something like nectar to come out, beauty to come out, it will always have a shadow to it. And that there's an alchemy that can happen with nectar and poison together. And the myth goes on with the calling of Shiva, which is their representation of pure consciousness, to hold the poison. And that goes on, the myth goes on. But for the purposes of the workshop, let's think about nectar and poison coexisting. And in this, continuing with this idea of the bliss body, Frank Ostaseki, he is a grief counselor, Buddhist teacher, and he says these words: to be whole, we need to include, accept, and connect all parts of ourselves. We need acceptance of our conflicting qualities and the seeming incongruity of our inner and outer worlds. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means no part left out. These conflicting qualities, seeming conflicting qualities, poison, nectar, good, bad, these parts of ourselves. Have you had an experience where you're so convinced that you want to do something, is what you want, you really want to go in that direction, and all of a sudden it seems like it doesn't matter anymore? Or like you're really sure that you're going here, and then all of a sudden you find yourself here. There's these conflicting qualities within our being that sometimes we're not even aware of. Sometimes they don't even talk. And the work of inner sessions and the work of really, I mean, the work, not to say inner sessions like by me, but like the work of the inner work is of learning to let these parts communicate to each other and let them learn from each other and let this integration happen. And I have a question for you. What does freedom mean? If you have your journal nearby, take just one moment to write, what does freedom mean to you? When we talk about being free, when we talk about inner freedom, what does that mean to you? And so, with the premise of this retreat is that if we can see the entirety, the totality of our being, both what seems like nectar and what seems like poison, we will have unlimited access to this freedom. Why? Because we're not afraid of the poison, because we know how the poison works and we know how to heal it, because we're not running away from something that's inside. Because if we don't look at the poison is still going to be there and something's going to happen, and we'll be tied to it whether we want it or not. So the idea of internal freedom and my proposal to you is, let's look at it. Let's look at everything. Let's look at the nectar and the poison, what seems to be poison, because really it's not. It has the answers to our intuition. Freedom takes place. Jack Kornfield, free is not free from feelings, but free to feel each one and let it move on, unafraid of the movement of life. He's talking about witness consciousness. He's talking about that wisdom body. I am free, not because I am free from these feelings, but because I am free to feel them, unafraid of them. And there's this teaching of Buddhism called the cycle of emergent conditions, which talks about this. Cycle of emergent condition is a cycle. It goes on and on and on. Emergent conditions. Condition emerges, disappears, condition emerges. Cycle of emergent conditions. It talks about basically what Jack Kornfield is saying. There's a pleasant feeling. Ooh, I love it. I want it. There's an unpleasant feeling. Oh, I hate it. I love it. I hate it. I love it. I hate it. And in yoga, we would call this the vrittis of the mind. Up, down. Oh, I like this. Oh, no, I don't like that. Oh, I hate her. I love her. Like this kind of like flippant wee of reactions of the mind. And in Buddhism, there's the 8 worldly dharmas. Whenever we attach to pleasure, we are running away from the reality of pain. Whenever we are gaining something, we are afraid that we might lose it. Whenever we have a moment of fame, we're always uncertain if it will come with disgrace. And whenever there's praise, we're also afraid that it may come with blame. That is the cycle of emergent conditions. And there's many other binaries of consciousness, but these 8 are the main ones, which are really 4 with a double side, right? A poem by Rumi that I find it speaks about witness consciousness. This human being is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So our being human, this container for life to move through, those 8 worldly dharmas are unavoidable, right? That's life. How do we welcome and embrace rather than push away and be afraid? When we talk about wholeness, and we talk about this integrity of our being. The Hindu, I guess, really all world religions speak about this purity of where we come from, this part that we are a part of this amazing reality, which is God. And when we think about where we begin in our contemporary world, obviously we begin at inception. Some people may even deny that and say that we don't begin at inception, that we begin when we are born, or when the heartbeat beats. And there's something very interesting about our first heartbeat. It's miraculous, right? This, like, the moment the heart begins to beat in the womb of the mother, there's life, right? And in Eastern traditions, we begin much prior to that, right? We begin much prior to our parents having sex. We begin as a point of light in the mind of God. And they call this point of light the Gyoti Bindu. This point of light is, in essence, who we are and where we will go back to. And we won't be talking about the idea of reincarnation or not. I want liberation. I want to go back to this light and be one with God again. So that's what I'm interested in teaching. And this source that we return to, we can call it many names, and here are some of my favorite, but you can add your own. There's so many names to call the ultimate reality. Doesn't matter how we call it, it's this vast, open, loving presence. We come from this, and yet we forget that we come from this. We might have momentary recognitions that we are a part of this in a meditation or in a conversation where all of a sudden we feel love and understanding. In prayer, there's multiple moments that we have glimpses into what this is, but for most of the time, if we can really be honest, we forget, right? Or we just don't think about it. And this forgetfulness begins quite early in life, because we are coming from this pure consciousness into form. We're coming from this expanded state into the womb of the mother. We're coming from pure light into cells and into matter. Does that make sense? Expansion, contraction, that's God. And as we begin to grapple with the fact of, like, oh my God, now I'm in the womb of my mother, how do I process all of these stimuli that I'm getting? When the baby is trying to deal with all of those stimuli, it begins to forget that it's expanded, that it's God, because it has to deal with this new reality. Right? And what the insights of psychoanalysis give us, and in particularly Melanie Klein, if any of you have worked with psychology and children's psychology, Melanie Klein was, to me, she's fantastic, because she was the second woman to become a psychoanalyst in Great Britain in a time of a lot of struggle. And through observation, through that witness consciousness that she had access to, she was seeing how children were becoming defensive to situations that were overwhelming. She began to notice that we develop this semi-permeable membrane. If you think in biology, when we used to study biology in school, the cell has this lipid barrier, right, that allows certain things in and denies other things in order to protect itself. Do you remember the function of the cell and that membrane? She began to notice that we had that capacity with our mind, that we could take some things and then reject others. When we reject those other things, they really didn't disappear. They were still there, but we weren't incorporating them. So in our lingo for the workshop, we weren't integrating them. They were still there, but we hadn't integrated them. And this barrier to deal with the world is how we are coining the ego. So this is a whole workshop in itself. I think this is the workshop actually. So the ego, we talk of the ego for the purposes of dealing with these subjects as a psychological structure, a universal psychological structure that allows us to relate to the world. So without an ego, it would be very difficult to be in relationship with the world. The ego is that which creates a sense of separation. This is me, this is you, right? Then there's a lot of utility in that. Like my bank account, your bank account, my husband, your husband, right? There's a utility in having this relationship to the world. And I say universal because we all have this sense of separation, but it will vary obviously from culture to culture, depending on the master signifiers. What that means, master signifiers is just a very fancy word in psychoanalysis to say what people are thinking about. And so as we begin to enter a relationship with the world, we begin to forget that we came from this expanded state. And because we don't remember, but we do, because we're trying to deal with the stimuli of the world and everything is new and interesting and scary and fascinating at the same time. Like think about a baby just discovering the world, right? We sort of leave aside pure awareness. And what's interesting is that we begin to form this puzzle in life. We begin to make things make sense, tie things together. We begin to build this framework to life. And imagine that you have all these puzzles coming, all these pieces of the puzzle coming together, and there's this one piece at the center that you try to put another piece, and it doesn't fit. It's this very intricate piece that you try to cover up, and it doesn't cover up, and there's always this hole inside, because that's where the remembrance of who we truly are would come in. But because our world, our society doesn't constantly reminds us and is not structured in a way for that to be honored, we begin to find like we want everything to cover up that lack, right? So boyfriends, friends, drinking, partying, drugs, alcohol, shopping, dresses, shoes, books, whatever. Like we try to cover up, fill up that void with different means and strategies. And the only piece of the puzzle that fits is that remembrance. So lack, medicine. Whenever I'm lacking, I'm like, oh, thank you. Because it's an opportunity to like, anxiety creeps in and like, oh no, let me like, this lack is actually a reminder of emptiness, and this emptiness is space, and the space is pure awareness, and pure awareness is freedom. But we have to go, because the minute we feel lack, we're like, we're lacking. I'm deficient. I'm not good enough. I need to read another book. I need another dress. I'm using my examples. So how do we, remember? So by trying to fill up that void, we are in one way or another blocking our growth. And growth begins actually when we accept that there's lack instead of trying to fill it up. And self-sabotage is basically when we refuse to see that there's lack, we try to cover up, and we want to stay small. Because the structure of the ego, can't use my pointer. I just want to check with time. Whoa, we have 15 minutes left. Hey. Okay, we'll make it happen. So the ego always wants to have this sense of safety. But the sense of safety that it wants to have is not the safety necessarily that we were talking about with the nervous system. It just wants to feel like a baby again. It just wants to be fed and cuddled and nurtured and have the breast and have that softness and the goodness of the milk of the mother, which is perfect for a time in our lives. We should all have it. But when we're 21, 25, 30, 40, 45, 50, 67, 70, still wanting the breast of the mother instead of the ocean of consciousness, there's something there. Let me see, because we have 15 minutes and there's a lot to cover. So I want to be mindful with your time. And we have a meeting tomorrow, which I was going to go over something else. I'll continue. I might not finish all of the layers, but at least this piece, and then tomorrow I'll go into it. That's what we'll do. Okay. So as we're learning, if we travel in time, as we're learning of the, pause, one moment, please. There we go. Okay. Makes more sense. Okay, so as we're studying the ego with the insights of Melanie Klein and what I was saying of how we develop this stimuli barrier of like, I want to incorporate this in my life. I don't want to incorporate this in my life, but it still exists. By doing that, the child is splitting its mind in two. A sound is loud and it creates tension and anxiety. We don't really know what happened. And there's a split. Is this good? Is this bad? And this is a lot of where this is the origin of the theory of object relations, of how we split things into good and bad. There's these overwhelming things that are coming at us that it may not be overwhelming when we are older, but when we are this fragile little baby that can't even feed itself or clothe itself, things are very stimulating, and we don't always know what is happening. And so there's things that feel scary that maybe to an adult they're not, but to a child they are. And so we fragment and separate in order to cope with reality, because we want to have that sense of safety. We want to feel only the good things, right? When something doesn't feel as good or we don't interpret as good, we want to shun it away. And so what this creates is the split mind. And I want to do a little graphic. I need to get a whiteboard for this at Escazú home. So we have this field of mind, which is like what I was saying, the stimulus barrier, the world, me, the world. And when I split my mind in two, there's things that I am allowed to know, and there's things that I am not allowed to know. What would be later known as the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind. There's many suggestions of the early literature of Freud that the mind is like an iceberg. I don't know if you've heard of this. I'll give you a brief. So think of an iceberg in the ocean, Arctic Sea, very cold, ice. And from above sea level, you see a mountain that's above sea level, right? So you see this mountain. What we don't see is that underneath that line of the ocean, there's this very big structure underneath the ocean, right? And so like Titanic, right? You think that you can somehow navigate through it, but there's all these things that you can't see. And so Freud's idea of using the iceberg as a metaphor was like, we think that there's this little thing here, but there's all of this thing underneath the water that we're not able to see. And that begins the history of psychoanalysis. And I speak of psychoanalysis because I studied it for 5 years at the Sat Yoga Institute. But really, the more I learn about mysticism and I learn about ancient, and by ancient I mean older religions, it was a form of psychotherapy, really. A shaman really was a psychotherapist at that time. Maybe now, but I haven't met any yet. Because they can go deep into the unconscious, bring light to it, and help you heal. And so in the modern world, we're talking in the 1800s in Vienna, in Austria, 1900s, I'm sorry. What is it? 1900s. And the concept of the unconscious was developed by Sigmund Freud because he used to be a psychiatrist. So he was working with the chemicals in the brain, which I think it's very valid. Meaning, I'm not saying that psychiatry is not good. But Freud was working as a psychiatrist, and he began to see that when he listened to his patients, there was this release that would happen. And what he began to observe was that this that we're calling the unconscious, as it came out, it was like that part that was hidden was frozen, and it was frozen over time. So let's say something froze when you were 3 years old. Something happened. Your mom shouted because the neighbors saw her naked, or your aunt was too drunk and she broke something, or whatever thing happened that all of a sudden you were afraid and you didn't know what was happening and your world was totally chaotic, which again, to an adult it may not be as overwhelming, but to a child it is. This freezes. And so we grow older and our bodies grow older and we develop, but this little thing stays there, frozen. And so every time a door bangs, you feel this rush in your nervous system, and you don't really know what it is. And then you begin to explore, and then you begin to see that every time that sound hits something in you is because one day your father was very angry and he came drunk and he banged the door until he crashed it. Like, that's just one example. And tomorrow we'll go deeper into this, the structure of trauma. But what he began to see was that when people unfroze what was frozen, they became healthy again. What was so fearful and scary opened up, and all of a sudden we became more functional, relatable human beings. And so he says, okay, I'm going to put on hold psychiatry, and I'm going to start working with this information that patients are bringing that is mysterious, because you never know. And that's when he developed free association. Free association is this technique where you maybe have seen it in like memes, or if you've gone to a formal psychoanalytic session, you lay down on a couch and there's a therapist who enacts the role of witness consciousness. And you begin to just talk and trace and let your thoughts wander and let memories come up and let images come up. And the therapist, acting like witness consciousness, ideally not judging, is taking note and is asking you the right questions and is helping you travel to this place where the symptom was, where the memory was frozen. So when we journal, if you have a journal practice, that's a way of tuning into the free association technique. Sometimes, I don't know about you, but I talk to myself when I'm by myself, when I'm washing dishes, when I'm driving, I have this discourse happening. That can be a way of free associating. Obviously, it's totally different if you're doing it with a trained professional, but I'm giving you some ideas of how accessible it is to explore this. It's not something weird. It's there within us, and it's easy to begin to follow threads. And so this is where the idea of the unconscious gets explored. So what Carl Jung began to see is that, and Jung was Freud's student, and what he began to see is like, listen, man, like, well, I don't know if he talked to him this way, but people are not only repressing what is so horrible, they're also repressing what is so good in them. So in Vienna at this time, people had to be very uptight. Women had to wear these corsets, and men had to be very successful, and money was starting to be a thing, and luxury was starting to be a thing, and we were moving farther and farther away from need and moving into comfort. And so all of these like tendencies were being repressed. All of our like tribal tendencies were being repressed. And that was at that time. And now in society, you know, like let's say a sexual impulse, a sexual drive, what, like, I don't think there could be more porn available. So people don't need to repress sexuality so much, to just go with their phone to the public restroom and masturbate. Like, it's not something that's repressed anymore. What is repressed, and this is what Jung was delving into, is our goodness. We forget how amazing we are. We forget all of our potential. We forget our talents. We forget what brings us joy. We forget. So it's not only that we repress this evil thing that wants sex and food. Like we actually have that available, and then we repress our spiritual and our goodness and our. You see what I'm saying? And I'm almost going to wrap up. In 5 minutes, we'll be done. And okay, so we begin to discover what this encrypted code is, frozen in time. We begin to work with it. The ice melts. We can see it for what it is. Space opens up. What is frozen in our mind creates this impediment for life energy to flow through. So when that frozenness can melt, more energy, more information, more intelligence can move through. And what Jung began to see is that other than this like operating mode, we have 4 functions to our psyche, and I'll wrap up with this. We have this capacity to think, to see clearly. We would say mindfulness, really. Like human beings have this capacity to think clearly. But we also have this capacity to feel deeply, and to really feel what is happening in our being, right? That mind-body connection. We also have this capacity to sense, like antennas, sensing what is happening. And then there is this intuition, which we'll get more into tomorrow. And our intuition is this inner compass that gives us a hunch to where we are going. And let's see. It's 9:30. I want to wrap up with a story so that tomorrow we can delve into the structuring layers of the self formally. Short story, short bedtime story. So there is, it's called the story of the farmer, if you want to look it up, a Buddhist story of this man who really is playing the role of that wisdom body, a non-judgmental presence, because everything, as he grew older, he began to see that things were not really what they seemed. He had this farm, and he had a horse that he adored because it was a very crucial helper in the development of their farm, which was their means of survival. And he lived with his son. And every morning they would go out with the horse through the fields, do the work of the day, and come back. And in one of these scoutings, the horse, I always make up this story, but for the purposes of the storytelling, I will say it my way. So they go out into the fields, and the horse falls down through a hill and gets injured. And they try to help him, but the horse dies. And so this is very heavy, because not only horses are difficult to get. We're talking a long time ago, when horses are your means of work, your means of traveling. They're very crucial components to surviving. So the farmer is digesting that this happened, and some neighbors find out, and they come and they give their condolences to the farmer, and they're like, oh, it's so bad that this happened, we're so sorry. And the farmer is like, maybe we just have to wait. And next day, the son is traveling by himself in the farm, doing the work on his own, and he finds this beautiful stallion untamed in the fields, and it's like, wow, this is a miracle. There's a new horse just coming when we needed it the most. So the son takes on the horse, and he brings the horse to the farm, and they train the horse, and the weeks pass, and this horse is this wonderful stallion that is helping them again. And so the neighbors come in, and they're like, wow, this is such good luck. You have this amazing stallion, is younger, is stronger. That's so awesome. And the farmer is like, well, this is just what's happening, right? And days pass, and the son decides, okay, it's time to take the horse now on this journey. So he takes the horse, tries to train him, goes out into the fields. First time doing this, the horse falls, trips on the son, and breaks the son's leg. The son crawls back into the horse. They try to go back into the house. He gets to the farm. He needs a lot of healing. His leg is not getting better. All the neighbors come in, and they're like, oh my God, your son, this is so bad. This is terrible. And the farmer is like, we just don't know. And then a few days later, the military comes along, because there's a war happening, and they need all the younger men to go to war. And they come to recruit this man's son, and they can't take him because the son broke his leg. So you can imagine, when the neighbors come and they say, this is good luck, the farmer says, we just don't know what could happen next. So with this bedtime story, I would let you go. I'm sorry I went 4 minutes over time. There's a lot more to cover, so I'll meet you tomorrow. If you can come at 8 a.m., we'll do our morning practice, and then at 7 p.m. we'll meet for our structuring layers of the self. A little bit of a homework exercise. Take in the story and notice how we label what is good and what is bad, and see what happens if you take this attitude of the farmer throughout your day and be like, I just don't know. And see what happens, what opens up, and tell me later. I'll explain how to book the sessions tomorrow so that I don't take more of your time. Have a beautiful evening. And tomorrow we'll get a chance to hear more from you and talk, okay? Namaste. Good night.
Chao, gracias.
Gracias, Cremita. Mil gracias.
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 Buenas noches.
Thank you so much. Buenas noches.